What's up, Brother Jeff?
All right.
How are you?
Good.
Hey, man, we're back with the follow-up. Just following up with Pastor Jeff about the service on Sunday morning. Man, it's been a wild week. I mean, we had to postpone this sermon a little bit, and you said you changed some things too, so that's fun. Did you like the little bit of time off? How was it for you, Brother Jeff?
Yeah, I liked it. I was able to get ahead in sermon planning for a couple weeks in our new book we're going to be studying here after the Mission Sunday in Colossians. And but yeah, the sermon this Sunday I reworked it, and then after the first service I reworked it again. I didn't think it flowed well in the first service, so I changed it up in the second service. But
so I got some questions for you today. Just once again, hey, church family, if you have a question, email it to me, and I would love to ask it of our pastor, and he loves to answer them too, right?
Yeah.
So, man, you've been in ministry for what, 20 years or so? How long?
Well, let's see. 25 plus years, right?
Wow. That's awesome. So at what point in that did you realize the importance of discipleship? Because it does feel like, hey, like this term, it's something we've been having to give definitions to and talk about and cast vision for. So it's obviously not something that's been prioritized for super long in our churches. When did you say this is important and this is what I need to push our church toward?
Right. Yeah, I think early on, we had grown up in a Baptist church. We focused a lot on evangelism, which we should do that.
Yeah. And
then, but I don't think there was a real clear pathway for discipleship. There might have been like a book or something you would give somebody, and basically it was up to them to understand. At least if there was a pathway, I never knew of it. So, and then most churches I served in, it was kind of the same thing. Someone makes a decision, then what's their next step? Well, go join a group, go join a class. So this really didn't come about until when I was serving at the church in Tennessee at Long Hollow, and our pastor died. David Landon, a great pastor, man. He was phenomenal to work with. And then we had another pastor come on, Robbie Gallaty, and that was kind of his, I guess that was his thing that he focused on, is discipleship. And it was kind of one of those things to where he felt like it had been lost. And I think it had to some degree. So that's where I really started beginning to understand what a disciple was and why we needed to focus on developing leaders, not just doing more, but being more. And so that's where a lot of that came from when I was on staff there at Long Hollow in Tennessee. And I'm trying to think when that was. It was in the 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20s of 2000.
Okay.
It was before COVID.
Oh, just before COVID?
Yeah, it was before COVID. So
yeah. Well, that's cool. Because I guess I started really hearing about discipleship when I got to college. And
right.
I was involved in my college ministry, and that was 16, and so it feels like that is a movement that comes out of those like 2010s.
Right.
That people started realizing, man, like we do a good job of reaching people, a bad job of like continuing to help them grow in their faith. And I mean, I was lucky enough to have, mentors and great parents who just kind of lived it out, like how Philip talked about at our men's conference, right? Watching his dad, like that's a lot of my story is that. But I love to see the intentionality. I heard Caden calling parents and kids earlier today, like trying to connect with students and help them grow. And hey, how can we get your kids to like be here more? So that's really cool.
But I say it took place in the 2000s, but also I think early on, I first heard about a parent's role to be a discipler of their child first. That was where I really heard. That was back when I was on staff in Orlando. The very first time I was in Orlando, I went to a conference and it was talked about the parent's role of discipleship, and then it kind of morphed into this. And so anyway, so that's where all this really came from.
I love it. It's cool hearing how many people really connected with this last sermon, the Mary and Martha. I think there's a lot of people who, man, it's a little touchy for some folks.
Right,
we all have these Martha tendencies, like you even confessed to having them yourself, right? And I think that, man, it's good to be reminded that, man, sometimes we just need to sit at the feet of Jesus. So I guess something that I just kind of walked away wondering is, do you think there's I think for me, what I noticed is I think the difference in Mary and Martha was just this understanding of who Jesus really was. Like, I think Mary had fully realized who this is. This is the Messiah, the Savior, the one who we've been waiting for. And maybe Martha wasn't all there yet. Maybe that contributed to a little bit of her busyness and her serving. But man, I think when you read that story, you see so much more the understanding of how significant this person of Jesus is. And Mary caught it. And I think Martha kind of missed it a little bit. I mean, would you say that that's...
Yeah, I think, and that's why I was looking up this verse here. If you go to John 11, it talks about, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. I think you get the idea there that Mary understood. Jesus had been saying, how long had he been saying, that he was going to die, and then she basically had this moment where she went in and anointed, like it was almost like a burial preparation that Jesus talked about there, and so that as you mentioned John 11 a while ago, and as you look at that, you see that, man, she kind of caught on like what was happening here, and I think that's what I think she understood. So that was leaning into his word and being disciple. She was leaning in, right, because Jesus had been saying that for telling his disciples, and so. Yeah, I think that Mary kind of caught that and understood that, but I mean, all of it, I guess, is something we just kind of glean from the Bible. I'm not. It doesn't explicitly say that, but it's something we can look at and think, okay, but maybe she got it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the posture, right? Like the difference in the person who wakes up in the morning and gets in their word, or like makes time in their day for, I'm going to be in the word, versus the person who. And I've been this person. This is not a call out of anyone. Who keeps putting it off, and now it's 10 o'clock and I'm ready to go to bed and I'm tired and I just didn't get in the word today.
Right.
It's like I got busy with everything happening in life and didn't make time. And the more I mature in my faith, the more I make time. I make time for the word. And,
right.
Man, you brought up John chapter 11, and the cool thing about Martha is we get to see her again here in John chapter 11. When Lazarus dies, because Lazarus is her brother and Mary's brother, and she actually meets Jesus on the road, and Mary, it says that Mary is still there, but Jesus has come, and in verse 20, it says Martha heard that Jesus was coming, and she went and met him, so she hears he's on the way, but Mary remained at the house, and it says Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died. But even now, I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. And I just find that really cool because it is a little bit of a redemption arc for Martha. We give her a hard time about what we talked about on Sunday in Luke, but she came to Jesus and was like, man, have you been here? He wouldn't have died. And I know that, man, God will do whatever you ask because, man, you're a son. And so it is cool to see that there's that realization there, and I like that she gets kind of this redemption story. I mean, it shows we can all kind of grow, right, from leaning in.
Yeah, and even in verse 5, it says, now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. I think, it mentions her by name again. Mm-hmm. Jesus loved her. And maybe a redemption story, but also I think maybe something that was always there in Martha that, we use that verse, and so many people, man, they feel like Martha half the time, like what you mentioned earlier. So, I don't want to say we give Martha a bad rap. I think the truth is it reveals something about ourselves in Martha that we see and that we relate to. So, anyway, that's all I got to say about that.
No, and I love it. So you just came out of your sermon prep meeting with your team, and they asked you a tough question.
Yeah.
And I want to just give you a chance to answer it here. If y'all didn't catch this on Sunday, his sermon prep team did, and they asked him this: what would it take for Martha to sit at Jesus' feet? You asked the question, and they were like, you didn't answer the question, brother.
Yeah, I didn't answer it. Yeah. So yeah, they were right. And so let me first of all say this: that when I'll make mention sometimes that the team, the sermon prep team, I asked some lay people in our church to meet with me on a weekly basis, and they get the opportunity after every sermon to come in and help me evaluate it, to help me be better, to help me make sure I'm growing. And also they get to see what I'm working on, and they get to also add input to say, hey, you know what, it's better. And one of the things I ask them every week is what, you know, what's one thing to keep, one thing to throw away from yesterday? And one of them was that you never answered the question, you know, what would it take to get to Mary's, you know, get Martha to get to Jesus' feet? And I was like, well, you know what, you're right. I did not do it that way. So I can do that now. But what would it take to get Martha to the feet of Jesus? I think number one, it would take her having to go back through all three of those points and reevaluate what she's really looking at, what she's dwelling on, and what she's leaning into. She'd have to evaluate each of those, and I think then have to change and live differently. That you know, here's what she's looking at. She's looking at what everybody else is doing. She's looking at all these things she has to do. She can't do that anymore. She has to live differently. She has to learn to lay things down. Number two, what's she dwelling on? Well, she's dwelling on what everybody else is and isn't doing. You know, and I think that's again something she'd have to reevaluate. And then the third is that, you know, what was she leaning into? She was leaning into everything but Jesus at that moment, right? Yeah. So I think, you know, that's what it would take. But listen, if we don't know what happens after that story, right? I mean,
outside of John 11, I don't, you know.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't know if she ever leans in, or if she's like, you know what, Jesus, you're right. You know, or, oh, you know what, Jesus, wow, you are so right, you know. Yeah. I don't know what happens. So we don't know if she ever got to the feet of Jesus. But so now somebody's going to say, well, you still haven't answered it. Well, can we ever answer it? I don't know. I think the bigger question is, what is it going to take you to get to the feet of Jesus?
Exactly. Like because on the first slide, like I'm the person who puts the slides up, and on the first slide it said Martha, comma, and then it was your question, your first point, and then the which it said like, Martha, what are you looking at? And then you would ask, but you didn't tell me to put it on the slides as Martha, what are you dwelling on? Martha, what are you leaning on? It just said, what are you? Because, you know, Martha is the stand-in for the us, right? Because we all have those tendencies.
That's right.
So it's good stuff, man. I wanted to ask one more, and I don't know how much of it's a question, but or just some advice that I'd love for you to like give is in all your wisdom, your pastoral wisdom.
Right. Yeah.
Man, this is kind of what I got out of this for me as a pastor, because you talked about the temptation for us to just work sometimes, right, and to forget the sitting at the feet. And man, that is a temptation, especially in ministry, because busyness it doesn't equal faithfulness, but the faithful, out of an overflow of love for Christ, are busy with his work. That's kind of something I kind of pulled out, was like, that helped me kind of frame my life. Like, I'm going to be busy with God's work because, man, I am a faithful person,
right,
or try to be, right? So I guess the question that I have for you and the encouragement I want you to give our people is just, man, do you have any like suggestions for making time to like do the work that is like the faithful work of Christ, that's not just the distractions and the things that get in the way? Like, man, how do you suggest that our people make time to be Mary instead of following the temptation to be Martha, I guess?
Yeah, you know, I think, you know, that's a question that, first of all, I think you have to understand. I think Martha, all of us need to serve. We all need a place to do it, but I think we need to do it out of the overflow of what we're receiving from Christ. Mm-hmm. And I think also this speaks to maybe Martha's identity, because, you know, if we find our identity in serving, then that's what we're naturally drawn to. Yeah. You know, if we find our identity in Christ, then we're drawn to that first. Then everything else, seek ye first the kingdom. And so I think maybe there's something there along those lines we should look at. But also, how do we? I think your question is how do we find time to be more at the feet of Jesus, like Mary? Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, Will, I think this goes back to, I believe it was did we do it here, or did I do it with a D group? I don't remember, but Mark 1:35. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, went to a solitary place where he prayed. It was specific. It was it was a place. It was a time. I think we have to do that. If we don't plan for, we plan vacations, we plan our day, we plan everything else. Why would we not plan to meet with Jesus? And I think, but then also I think there's another aspect of this that I'm not fully prepared to even answer if I know I can, but also practicing the presence of being with Jesus. And I don't know I fully understand that when I say that, but I think it's a daily awareness of, man, we are walking daily, walking in the Spirit, walking, in the presence with God and knowing that He's there. In my reading this morning with my D group, we're in Genesis, and it was out of Genesis 27, 28, but then it was about Jacob, and when he woke up, God had been speaking to him in a dream. When he woke up, it said he woke up and lifted his head from the rock his head was laying on, and he said, man, this must be the presence of the Lord. The presence of the Lord is here. Mm. And it's like, wow, okay. So he was able to recognize that. And do we recognize that in our daily life? Are we leaning in enough to God's word? Do we recognize His presence at work around us? And are we making time for that? We make time for everything.
We do.
And so we have to make time for it. And so I think that's where it didn't, this is probably where the whole idea of a quiet time came from,
Yeah.
It's a quiet time. And that's how I was taught it, So maybe you were taught that way, the word quiet time. We don't use that word hardly anymore now, though, do we?
Not a lot. But there's a lot of value in finding that quiet space.
Right.
We talked about this a little bit when we talked about looking up, right? This idea of like, how can a parent in the busyness of life with all these kids running around find the quiet spot, And yeah, I think a little bit of it is getting up early, but I think my daughter beats me out of bed every morning.
Yeah, well, and it's funny you said it because my wife, when we had kids, like she had to start getting up early. So I would always, why are you getting up at 4:30? Mm-hmm. It's because, she's drinking coffee and reading her Bible. That's the only time she can get.
Yeah.
And I just don't think, of course, we're like, well, I'm so tired, we need sleep. I just don't think God's all impressed that much with our sleep. I just, I think we're going to be okay if we miss 30 extra minutes. Maybe we should go to bed early, and turn off ESPN or whatever it is, and go to bed. So anyway, hope this was helpful.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it because I like this time because I get to kind of ask some questions that I have, and then I have thoughts, about things that stood out to me as well. And so, man, thank you, Jeff, for taking some time to talk to us today. And I hope that I'm looking forward to Locking Arms. Tease us a little bit. Where are we going to be reading out of, huh?
So this Sunday coming up,
yes.
And we're going back to Acts,
yes.
And we're going to, right after we've talked about the place was shaken, if you remember, we talked about looking up, we just jump right into the next passage where the church is unified, and they're generous, and we meet one of my favorite people in the Bible. I have a few of my favorites. Of course, everybody's favorite is Paul and Jesus, but I love Barnabas, and we're introduced to Barnabas, that's his nickname. I love Barnabas. He's one of my heroes. So we're introduced to him in this chapter. So it'll be hopefully a good message for us to glean from this Sunday.
Good. Well, we appreciate it, and we'll see y'all this next week. Y'all have a great one.